حكي البابا حكي أيوة ما شاء الله ما شاء الله ليك البابا حكي.
One of the things that struck me was the eeriness of life interrupted, where you had buildings collapsed and you still had signs of children's toys and kitchen pots and things like that, or buildings, slanted and curtains still blowing in the wind, and kitchen cupboards hanging open because of the tilt of the buildings. It was devastating. Nobody was prepared for the scale of the disaster, the scale of the destruction, and just the chaos that comes in a situation like that. No organization could be prepared for a disaster of this scale. The Turkish Red Crescent and the IFRC were on the ground right away. And so that coordination is so important, so that people stay safe, so that the needs are met. But as you can imagine, in those early days, it's really challenging. When a disaster reaches a scale where international support is needed, and it was in those very early hours of the morning on the day of the disaster that the Turkish Red Crescent reached out to the IFRC and said, we're going to need IFRC's support, we're going to need to request international assistance and launch an international appeal, and we're counting on you to support us in coordinating that effort. About 50% of the refugees living in Turkiye live in the earthquake-affected provinces, and so they were also, just like their neighbors, their Turkish neighbors, were also deeply impacted by this disaster. And of course, many of those families had they themselves only begun to rebuild their lives here in Turkiye after having fled Syria. So you can imagine that placed additional burdens and strains on an already vulnerable population. And of course, now you have a government that's hosting this large-scale refugee population, also needing to respond to a large-scale natural disaster where its own citizens are affected. But we know that there are lots of people really still in need and really still in need of support to be able to recover. So that funding, that international attention still needs to come in support of the response. It's a marathon and not a sprint. We always knew that. But we're just entering the second half of the marathon, and we're not near the finish line yet.